we couldn't just go out there and say, hey, you want to switch to Sendoso, start order, and we're just going to start order taking. We got to educate on like, what does gifting even mean? What is direct mail? Why would I do that as an SDR? Why would I do that as a field marketer?
You could head up the mountain really quickly, but it might be the wrong mountain 6 months down the line. So that one's going to hurt.
Let us open your eyes to all the other ways that you could use this on either a daily basis or a recurring basis or even an automated basis, and open up people's minds to those options. And then they're like, oh, wow, I thought about this as like a one-time thing, and now we're going to use this evergreen.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm Cory, and today we're lucky enough to be talking to Kris Rudeegraap. He's the co-founder and CEO of Sendoso, a leading sending platform that specializes in enhancing customer engagement through innovative direct mail and gifting strategies. He's got over a decade of experience in sales and biz dev, and he's held significant positions at various tech companies, including TalkDesk and Yapstone. As a renowned thought leader, he frequently shares his thoughts on evolving market dynamics, the role of AI in sales, and pretty much anything else you want to know. So go give him a follow on LinkedIn. Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cory. Great introduction. I like that.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, what would you add to it? Help our listeners get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from San Francisco Bay Area. Got a newborn kid on that just is 9 months old. I guess maybe not newborn, but still young.
Hey, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Obsessed with startups, entrepreneurship, and anything related to gifting and direct mail. I'm an expert on.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. So talk us through, what was the inspiration behind the founding of Sendoso?
Yeah, it really came from my experience in sales and firsthand really seeing the evolution of outbound and prospecting, which, a decade ago, you were amazed by a mail merge, as
Right.
funny as it sounds. And you'd send out 100 emails and get like 95 replies. And that like quickly diminished, even from what I would say from like the 2010s into like 2015. 2016 when I was about to start the company. And so during that time, I saw this diminishing email reply rates in front of me and saw an opportunity to think through what else I could do besides sending emails to book meetings and, did the cold calling, did the social selling. And I think those things were pretty obvious. What wasn't obvious at the time was doing this like thoughtful personal gifting, writing handwritten notes, being on a call, hear a dog bark and sending a dog toy afterwards, or even stealing swag from the marketing closet and boxing it up and sending it out. And it all worked. I was, top rep at the last companies. I was seeing great results from it. People would, book meetings with me and say, thank you for the gift. And so I thought, hey, how do I do more of this? I'm kind of sick and tired of packing boxes after work or, clicking on tracking links or telling my boss that my Amazon expense report was for a prospect, not for myself, and looked for a solution on the internet. I was Googling, what I could find. And there was really nothing out there that, met the demands or kind of was what I wanted. And so I went out and built it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic story. And I'm tempted to ask, what was the weirdest thing that showed up on your expense report in the early days?
Man, so many weird things. I mean, even dog toys is kind of a weird thing to be like, hey, boss, I'm expensing an itemized dog toy. I swear it's for a prospect.
Fair enough. I mean, but hey, you get to stretch your selling skills internally, right?
Exactly.
So you see this gap in the marketplace, you test it out, yourself, right? You're you're seeing awesome results. And then you're thinking, okay, so now I might bring something to market to kind of solve this need. And between that moment and where we are today, what have the biggest shifts around kind of strategic gifting that you've seen happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge shift from that time of, raised 150 million. We've seen hundreds of millions spent. There's millions of gifts sent. So, but across the board, some of the early unknowns was, I had initially thought that sales was going to be the buyer and was going to be the big user, which it ended up being a big champion and user, but marketing was the one that wanted to own this. So when I first started reaching out to sales leaders, they were like, this is great. I wish my team could use it. But they're like, talk to marketing first. So that was kind of a shift, which makes sense now. And in retrospect, it's quite obvious. But at the time, I thought I was going to sell to people like myself, and marketing was a big buyer there. I think the other thing is just all the different use cases. I thought this was just going to be for prospecting, and we see customers using gifting to drive ad conversions, to drive content download conversions, to use for webinar in-person event conversions, to drive the renewal and expansion experience post sales, to use for survey responses to MPS, to use an ABM to expand the buying committee. So there's dozens and dozens of use cases. Channel and is another one. The list goes on. That just wasn't as obvious to me, but that was because I was in my sales swim lane, and then I think that goes back to listening to your customers, because the customers were like, hey, I want to use it for this. Hey, can you integrate into Gainsight for this? Hey, can you integrate into this? Because we want to use it here. And it was just a lot of talking to customers, and that really opened up a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. I was talking earlier this morning with the CRO of a tech company that handles sort of outbound motions. And he was we got talking on the role of the CRO. And I think it's something you're starting to touch on a little bit here, right? And he was saying, if you're really just being a sales director, you're kind of doing it wrong. Like, you got to look at every step, like you're talking about, from marketing to SDRs all the way through renewals.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, are you seeing companies like leverage it throughout all of that sort of GTM cycle?
Oh, yeah. Some companies will come in with a certain, what I call like a leaky bucket or an opportunity, like, hey, we need to improve our SDR demo show rates. Or, hey, we really want to have an executive initiative around customer welcome kits. Or, hey, we are looking for new ways to drive people to our big user conference. And so a lot of times people will come in with an idea, and a lot of times it's actually more of like a campaign. And then there's a bit of education and evangelism on our side to say, well, this is a great starter campaign. Here, let us open your eyes to all the other ways that you could use this on either a daily basis or a recurring basis or even an automated basis, and open up people's minds to those options. And then they're like, oh, wow, I thought about this as like a one-time thing, and now we're going to use this evergreen. And I think that's been really cool to see. And, kind of goes back to our category creation and thought leadership, which, there's still 8 years in, people that we have to educate on how this works, why it works, how to use it better.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. And that does seem like one of the big unique advantages of this, is it can apply and hit so many different points in that customer sort of lifetime cycle. Would you say that there's like one or two really impactful case studies that you've had, or people that have leveraged this really well, and something that, if leaders are out there listening, they might want to replicate?
I mean, we have so many different case studies. A couple that come to mind, like Gong has done a great job on this, like Project Pinata, that they had influenced, I think, over 30 million in pipeline through us with that program. They also are one of the best at using our Amazon integration, which is pretty unique, which will either you can go out and go to Amazon and see, hey, this person has a kid, lives in New York. I'm going to send them a New York Yankees beanie, and Amazon will send it from their warehouse to our nearest warehouse. We unbox it, rebox it, put a handwritten note, maybe even some other collateral from that company, and then ship it out. So it allows you for these hyper-personalized gifts. We also have a smart send feature where you can plug in someone's email address or their persona, and we'll like suggest very hyper-personalized gifts. Gong's, awesome at that. Gainsight had a great outbound program with the book that their CEO had authored. They saw something like 6 million in influence outbound pipeline by sending out this book to prospects. But yeah, on our website, there's maybe a couple show links you can include for our success stories, as well as customer examples, which there's pages and pages and pages of inspiration too.
Cool. We'll definitely include those. And if people are interested, they can definitely follow that, find out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to shift gears a little bit. And because it seems like we're talking more and more about the whole revenue engine, the whole go-to-market strategy, I'd love to dive in a little bit if that's cool with you.
Cool. Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So you've expressed some opinions, let's just say, about SaaS pricing.
Yeah.
And how it may not be the best these days. I think you've said that it's broken, if I'm right. So walk us through that. Why is that? What's going on?
Yeah. So what I see is this shift, and I think AI is driving this shift in a couple different ways. One is AI is creating a lot more efficiencies and automations so that fewer people can drive way more productivity and way more output. So if you're selling a SaaS product to a user, and Sendoso included, we have these robust automations built into our platform now where like one user can set it up and trigger off all these gifts and automations that on a per seat basis makes it way more robust than just what it would have been years and years ago without that. Also, I'm seeing more of these SaaS companies have these use think about AI from a more usage or transaction type. So like Salesforce with their new agent force now is charging, $2 per conversation instead of
Yeah.
an additional like per user seat model, or same with like Intercom is charging on their like ticket resolution on a per, I think it's like $1 or 99 cents. Clay is charging on a credit model versus a seat model. And so I think more of these AI companies, or all companies that just add AI, are rethinking SaaS and are thinking usage transaction based more so than just your typical like how many more seats can I sell?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, everyone's been gaming the seat system as much as they can too from the beginning. So you mentioned Clay. I feel like they've got a unique story. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you think that they fit in?
Yeah, so big Clay fans. Clay. We really rebuilt our entire outbound engine on Clay, from a data orchestration and also our outbound SDR motion. And really, the things that we thought about in this era of profitable growth was we had this sizable SDR team that was doing a lot of copy paste tasks, I call them. So we did this like audit, and it was like, okay, I'm going to go manually check in Salesforce, then check LinkedIn. I'm going to manually look through LinkedIn and then go into outreach. I'm going to manually, do some reading here and then do some searching on Google here. I'm going to manually. And so there's a lot of that was taking up like more time in their day than they were actually like talking to prospects or
Oh, yeah.
doing like selling. And so we said, okay, with Clay, we could try to automate almost all of that, including like figuring out where they should spend their time. And so first thing is removing the manual task and automating that. The second thing we did with Clay is we used AI to improve personalization. And I think for a while, from probably the 2010s, even into like maybe a couple years ago, personalization was like, hi, insert variable. You work at insert variable. Other companies like insert variable. And it was just basically like mail merging from Salesforce data or HubSpot data. And so I think with the really interesting power that OpenAI gives you, you can prompt engineer like a sentence to say, if I'm the salesperson at Sendoso selling into this company, this title, who has this problem, and we can solve this by this and that, give me a sentence. And so now all of your emails can have, the same structure, because I think you don't want to let AI just take over your entire structure and template. But you can say, hey, structure 1 is problem identification. Structure part 2 is call to actions. 3 is a PS with a mention of this. And so that personalization is very powerful. And then the last thing is prioritizing time. And so we went from a sequencing, hey, step 1, you do this, step 2, you do this, step 3, you do this, where step 3, you might be doing a cold call when they didn't even open either of your first 2 emails. And so you're just coldly blinding. But you just have to go through that steps. Instead, now we say, hey, SDRs, here's a report that you can look at the highest intent person that clicked on the most emails, went to your website, so it's a score-based algorithm. And so that person that they're about to call, about to Sendoso, about to, invite to an event is the most likely person to convert than just like the next in line.
Yeah. Wow. I think if anyone out there listening right now was doubting whether you've figured this out or not,
Yeah.
the big clue for me was when you were like, "Oh, do you remember 2 years ago when people
Yeah.
would just be like, 'Hey, Corey, we know you work at Value Center.'" Like,
Yeah.
that was my inbox this morning.
Yeah,
So,
I know. I'm
and it's
saying
still happening, you know?
it's definitely like still, I think 90% of the market is still at the what I call 2 years ago. But you know, hopefully listeners here are like, wow, okay, I got to get on this now.
Yeah. And one other thing that I hadn't heard before, and it's like all good advice that kind of like smacks you in the head, right? And it's like, oh, it's so self-evident once you hear it, but you didn't think of it yourself. I love the idea that like step 3 in the cadence is not a cold call, but it's a cold call with a condition. Like if they
Mhm.
are 86 out of 100 scoring or
Yeah.
however you do it, right? How do you kind of like, imagine that's a big shift for an SDR team
Yeah.
that's been operating in an old model. So how can executives and their leaders kind of, in kind of go through these motions with them, make sure they're comfortable working in this new style?
I think this encompasses the entire company and how AI is disrupting workflows and processes. And so I think at the highest level, what we wanted to do is we wanted to empower the department leaders, our other C-suite execs to think about areas that we could tap into AI. And we came up with a short list of some of those. The obvious one was Outbound. There was a few other ones with customer service, et cetera. And so we went deep on those kind of with these tiger teams to figure it out. Addition to that, we wanted to have an entire workforce education reskilling on how to use AI, because I think there's all this talk about AI, talk about ChatGPT, but how do you empower your employees to really understand it? So we took some time out of multiple all hands as well as these one-off training workshops to say, here's like AI for all, which is more of the generic, like what you could do with ChatGPT, kind of saying, here's what you can do. We then, to try to get more buy-in from department levels, said, as a department, what are some specific tools that you should use? And we gave like ChatGPT Pro to folks. So that was like that was like the table stakes. But then we know that like certain departments can benefit from best in class tools. A customer service person might need an AI tool for what they do. An engineer might need a code completion tool that's built on AI for what they do. And so we crowdsourced and said, hey, come back to your department leads with interesting AI tools that you're coming across in your social circles.
Okay.
And that was a better way than force feeding it or micromanaging. And so we got a bunch of people saying, hey, this is a cool tool I found out about. And then at the end of all that, we had our CFO budget for some of these tools, which are surprisingly not crazy expensive right now. You can find an awesome, engineering code completion tool called Cursor. I think it was like $40 a month per user or something, which is like, you're not going to go out and pay like, 200 grand out the gate to get it. I guess if you have like a gazillion engineers, you would, but at a startup of our size, these are meaningfully valuable tools at costs that are affordable.
Yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind. And the other important thing to keep in mind, which you touched on, is when we think about AI now and we look at the last big disruptor, it feels weird to say, but like internet, right? If you want to go that far back in tech,
Yeah.
but like, when you're thinking about it now, it's like we're going at a rate of adoption. I think it's like, I want to say 2x faster than internet adoption. It's all end user driven.
Yeah.
And
Mobile too, I'd say is another one that I'd look at as a big like adoption curve,
Yep.
that big disruptor as well, more recently than even the internet.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And same thing, right? Like my company didn't tell me I had to buy an iPhone.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I might have bought it because it was convenient to get
Yeah.
company emails or something, right?
Yeah.
But it was all individual driven. And I think a lot of companies still, whether it's about security concerns or just because they're used to, the executive making the SaaS purchase decision or the manager making the SaaS decision, they're buying the tool and giving it to people instead of saying, hey, go try a bunch of them. Don't throw our private data in there, sure, but try them and then come back. So yeah, I love that. Okay, I feel like I let us astray on the pricing side of things a little bit. So we'll come back full circle now. Now that we're talking about these AI tools and their affordability. So if we go back to SaaS pricing and think about moving away from seats again to maybe more of a charge by transaction type model, what I'm thinking, if I'm a SaaS business trying to go through that transition, the thing that comes to mind, I don't know why, for some reason, is Office Space. Do you
Okay.
remember that one?
Oh yeah, the movie.
The movie, yeah.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
it's like, he's like, oh, these fractions of a cent,
Yeah,
they get
yeah,
rounded
yeah.
up, and then he puts the decimal in the wrong place, end up taking millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, if you've got a chat bot that you're selling to a big, like, insurance agency, it might be fractions of a cent every time they click it. But Salesforce, like you said, right, it's like $2 a hit. Where is that sweet spot, and how can leaders kind of navigate that transition, that strategy?
Yeah, I think this is where having a really amazing product marketing team comes in that can do a lot of that analysis for you or with you. I think this is also where I think some founders, some CEOs think talking about pricing and packaging is taboo. Hey, don't, if sales reps complaining, hey, pricing's not right, just go sell. Don't talk to me. I think you've got to take that into consideration and think about what the front line is seeing out there. And then, having customer advisory boards where you can have these more intimate conversations with your customers and say, hey, what do you think about this versus that? I even have personal advisors that I have that I can talk to that are, again, can take some of this and say, hey, well, I've seen this and that work, or hey, this could be interesting. But there is a bit of short-term pain with price changes for long-term gain. And it's almost like one step sideways for 10 steps forward. And it's not a perfect science, but it's also something that you don't want to get left behind, or you don't want your competitor to, get creative with their pricing. And then you're, a year behind them in terms of how you can productize that or go to market with that. So I think it's critical to have ongoing quarterly pricing and packaging conversations, especially at exec offsites. Even if you're coming up with these models and these presentations and the scenario planning for these pricing and how it's going to affect different parts of the business, even if you do that in a bubble and then end up just shelving it, at least if you come back a month later and have an urgent need, you're not like starting at zero. You're like, well, last quarter we thought about this, 2 quarters this, we have some prior art here, we had 20 customer interviews here. And so it's kind of like in an archive that you can go back to versus being at ground zero come an emergency.
Yeah, I really like that idea of having a strategic reserve, so to speak, on sort of on tap. And I think, I was reading one of your articles the other day, and this is something that you recommend for leaders too, right? Like,
Yep.
for sort of crisis planning. Can you talk through how that plays out on that level?
Yeah, I mean, I think straight from like the textbooks of like SWOT analysis and really thinking about the different risks. I think some people just get wide-eyed with what's all the best case scenario planning, and instead, what are all the future risks? I think whether it's, go-to-market changes, whether it's product roadmap risks, there's a lot of potential risks. And while it's not as fun as, always optimizing for the good stuff, I think, again, having this archive of, hey, what happens if competitor X does this? Or what happens if the market shifts to this? I think is a good executive offsite topic and a good area for CEOs to make sure that they have.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic advice, especially in sales and marketing. It seems like we talk about strategy, we think about strategy, but 85-90% of the time we're putting out fires.
Yeah, and I think for strategic CROs and CMOs too, it allows them to open up the longer term brain power, because I think, just the nature of the role, you end up getting this very short term, hey, it's end of month, end of quarter, I need to hit this number. And that's all that matters. But when you open up the bigger risks or the bigger, hey, in 2 years, what if this happens? It gets them thinking big picture, which I think is a nice forcing function.
I think that most executives kind of at that level have that strategic muscle, and I think they find creativity in it too. And I think you stifle that if you don't build in room for that, like you're saying. That's really important.
Yeah.
And then, I'll go back to something you said earlier, Kris. I know we're recording on Halloween, but as a marketing guy, this was like my Christmas, because I worked with a lot of salespeople, right?
Yeah.
And very closely. And about half of them are like, oh no, we need marketing. We just need marketing to be good, which is not a lot of times. We need it to be aligned. We got to talk. And then I feel like the other half are like, looking at the budget, can't we just get rid of marketing? Can't we just get rid of enablement here? But you said product marketing manager. So why is that so crucial? Why should that, be a role that CEOs and founders are looking to hire so early?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially the very early days, I think a lot of leaders, as founders and CEOs, think I need revenue, I need leads ASAP, and that's it. And I think that while that's important, you could lose track, not thinking about the right pricing and packaging, go down the wrong path of trying to sign up customers on the wrong pricing and packaging. You could have your roadmap and launches be not as wow factor lightning strikes if you don't have someone that really cares about that. Enablement, product marketing is great at enable. In the early years, you only have a few number of sellers. And if they're just out there whimsically selling without the proper enablement, you're going to run the risk of, maybe failing on your product market fit or your go to market fit because you think, oh, this is just our product's not working, but really it's the seller that's not working. Even ICP analysis, voice of the customer feedback in the early days. And then I think what was important for us too in the early days was our vision, category, and storytelling. It was, we couldn't just go out there and say, hey, you want to switch to Sendoso, start order, and we're just going to start order taking. It was, we got to educate on like, what does gifting even mean?
Right.
What is direct mail? Why would I do that as an SDR? Why would I do that as a field marketer? And while some of them had some past recollection, since we didn't invent either of those two, they're like, oh, direct mail. Like I had at this old company, my CMO mentioned we did this postcard send, or, oh, like gifting, like I don't get it. And so there's so much education in the early years to where you had that aha moment that product marketing excels at, and maybe demand gen is always in the data, always in the, let me go like run a campaign and drive some lead gen.
That's a really intriguing look at it, right? Like you can head up the mountain really quickly,
Yeah,
but it might be the wrong mountain 6 months down the
That's a great
line.
mouth.
So that one's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we kind of transition a little bit toward the end of the podcast here, obviously we talked about gifting, we've talked about AI for SDRs and outreach, and changing pricing models. This is going to be a lot to throw at someone, right? I imagine they're going to be excited. A lot of listeners are going to be excited, but where should they start?
I think I'll answer this in like two different ways.
Yeah.
One, I think for me, what's incredibly important is just learning as much as possible. And so I use a tool called Feedly that I subscribe to literally like 300 or 400 different blogs, pods, etc., all in one feed. And so, and instead of the mindless like scrolling through TikTok, I'll like scroll through tons of these articles to see pattern recognition. I'll see a new tool that looks interesting. And so I think that's one way to learn, is just soaking up all this really interesting information and doing so through some pattern recognition of like, ooh, lots of people are talking about this. And so finding trends early. The second place to start, I like to say it's not what you know, but who you know, or some people call it like your network is your net worth. And so I say go meet a stranger next week, or go meet with an old friend and chat up topics of this. There's so much you can get from other people that you wouldn't get just sitting in your computer, in between meeting. And while some of those meetings might be wild goose chases, you never know. And you're basically hoping you open up the right door and someone gives you this interesting tidbit, or, mentions something that you're like, I'm going to run with that.
I like it. And I'm also thinking now that you're going to have to help me reconfigure my Feedly account after the show, because, 300, 400 sources. Mine's lacking, it seems. All right. Moving forward. So Sendoso, obviously, you all have enjoyed tremendous success. And looking at the other flip side of things, it probably makes you a target for a lot of people out there, a lot of SDRs wanting to reach out and talk. So as someone who has helped to redefine personalization, has taken all these intriguing, unique approaches, what earns time on your calendar these days, if anything?
Yeah. Well, I'm an obvious sucker for someone sending me a gift, especially a personalized one, because it's what I do. And so if you are doing that, then you're listening to my love language, so to speak. But besides that, I think personalization and really understanding me and my problems is critical. And also, I think it's for those SDRs, AEs listening, it's understanding what the right thing to say to a CEO. I get prospected into it and like, hey, I want to talk to you about X, solution. Can you meet next week? And it's like, I don't manage our XYZ. Like, you should be asking me. You should either be telling me you're talking to my colleague already and just informing me of a CTA so that when it hits my desk, I'm like, oh yeah, I heard about this. Or saying, hey, I talked to one colleague. Do you think this other colleague would care? Do you want to make that introduction? Let me know. And so I think it's really understanding the buyer you're talking to. I think some people try to go way too high and they miss out on the right call to action to that very high target prospect. So I think it's know the buyer, know the persona, and know what the right call to action is. Because jumping in, asking me about a tool and trying to get 15 minutes of my time is I just might ignore that. But if you're like, hey, I bet this tool looks interesting, it does. Can I introduce you to someone who would actually care? And then I might say, hey, sure, here's the intro. Talk to this person.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we teach everyone to go high, but you're right. I mean, it's not going to work if it's not the right fit, like everything else. So
yeah, or go high with the right ask is
there you go.
I like about it. So
yep, I like it. Okay. Well, I think that just about wraps us up. If there's anything else, what would be the one piece of advice that you didn't share already that you would share with revenue executives out there?
Oh man. Well, I mean, obviously go get and use Sendoso. But I think
There you
that's
go.
But no, I mean, the big thing for revenue executives is go talk to customers.
Yep.
Go meet with the 5 customers next week. If you don't have at least one customer meeting next week, you're doing it wrong. And hopefully over coffee or dinner too, because you can unlock so much more information, what they care about, how they speak. And then after that, invite them to an advisory group and become better friends with your customers. So
I love it. Again, simple, self-evident once you hear it, but next no one does it. Right?
exactly.
No one goes out there and
Move it up on the
actually
to-do
does it.
list from like the 20th thing to like the first thing and get off. When you stop listening to this podcast, go do it right now.
Fair enough. Well, Kris, it's been an absolute pleasure. This has been so much fun. If people want to hook up with you, where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. If you're curious more about Sendoso and some of the examples, check out sendoso.com. And if you want to chat with me personally, send me an email. It's Kris, Kris, @sendoso.com.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks again. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Cory.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.